you've been here before, they're pretty familiar with it. So I'd love to introduce the Service Design Network, and we are the New York chapter, although now everyone is everywhere. So we have folks from all different parts of the country, and then we do people join from different parts of the world. So welcome everyone from wherever you are in the world. And just a quick slide, if I can get my screen to work here. A little bit about the Service Design Network. I usually do a talk track over this, but here's some icons that you can look at to really understand. It's a group run entirely by volunteers. So this is a global organization that you can join. They have editorial materials that they have online, case studies, conference at least once a year, chapters like this across the world. There's a lot that the community offers, and so highly recommend to look more at their website, see their membership offerings, but we are one of the chapters of many within the world. And so we're excited to be here. Kathleen and Antonio are co-organizers, and we also have a lot of different volunteers and regular folks join us. So thanks. I also want to announce that we have a website now. We have a lot of different properties across the web, so including the Service Design Network main site. We have a meetup site. Did you know that we had a Twitter and a LinkedIn? Maybe not. But we also have Instagram. We have a lot of different platforms or a lot of different channels that we're using. And so this website is going to help us centralize all of those. I was going to give you a quick tour, but I'm having an issue just toggling between the Keynote and the web. So I'd recommend just, it's easy to remember, SDN NYC, 6 letters, and you can see a little bit about our mission. You can see past events. And so that's where we're trying to centralize any presentations that speakers wanted to share, any links that speakers or facilitators want to share. We have some fun pictures from our times in person and then as well as online. But this is a place to go now. I would say still check Meetup to see the events upcoming, but this is where you can look at historic information about us. We also have a form on here where you can submit a request for an event, or if you have a speaker, any sort of recommendation you have. So please check it out. And then also, just to make note, in case you were unaware of our other social media spaces, it's SDN NYC on Instagram, Twitter, and then on LinkedIn, it's SDN New York Chapter. And we ask that if you see something this evening and you feel like you want to share it, to please mention us. We love that. Andy's actually on here, and he often reshares a lot of our posts and what people are doing. So please, if you like something, tag us, and you can use these tags down here, pretty straightforward. Service design, anything relevant to tonight's topic. So yeah, try out social media with us. We'd love to connect with you there. And last couple slides here. We've mentioned breakout rooms the last couple events, but just in the off chance that you've never been in a breakout room, sometimes it takes up to 15 seconds for you to get into that room. So we just ask for patience during that time, and it is a little bit jarring. It's very different from previously in person going between a small group and a big group. So it's a little bit awkward, but we just wait or ask that you have patience as you wait through being moved around digitally. And then finally, last slide is really about, please rate us. If you have a chance after the event ends to think about how the event was for you, we do look at these and we do think about what we want to do more of and what people are responding to. So please be sure to rate us afterward. And that's everything about housekeeping, unless Kathleen, Antonio, would you like to add?
Yeah, no, I just want, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Okay, I will. Yeah, I just want to say that, I mean, the website is something very new and, you know, it's something that we're really kind of trying to use to engage more with the community. We're going to probably take a break the month of August and, you know, start fresh from September, of course, because of the, you know, current circumstances. We are looking also at, you know, changing or renewing constantly what we are doing and the format of the events online, hopefully also in person soon. So yeah, really, you know, I encourage everybody to use this opportunity of the website and the new way of connecting with us to propose things.
Yeah, I was just going to say that, yeah, we're going to take a little break. So during this time, if anybody has any ideas, thoughts, you know, can go on our site and submit your ideas or connect with us. We're always happy to chat and brainstorm what things we can bring to the community. So yeah, looking forward to tonight's event and connecting with you all after this as well.
Cool.
Yeah. So I guess with that, I just want to give a real quick intro about our speaker, Alex, tonight. I actually met Alex 4 years ago. Around this time, I was just texting her the other day, and I was like, "Oh my God, the last time we were using WhatsApp, we were in Copenhagen." I took a class from her for the behavioral design when I was in Copenhagen Institute of Interaction Design. And ever since then, I learned a lot about her work with great impact. She's traveling all around the world, doing a lot of great things with behavioral design and how to help different people in different environment, different society, a lot of things. It's really fascinating. So today I'm actually really excited to have her here because I've been wanting for her to speak for us, but she's no longer physically in New York, she's in Colorado. So thanks to this current situation that we're able to reconnect and have her share her experience and learning with us tonight. So I guess with that, I just want to hand it over to Alex and she can do her own introduction, all the amazing work she's doing. Yeah, so Alex, hand it over to you.
Thank you so much, Kathleen. Good evening, everyone. I'm Alex. As Kathleen mentioned, I'm based in Colorado, but from New York. And our intention had always been to do this in person, but here we are in 2020, the dumpster fire year. So maybe it's better because maybe there's more of you from different places. And I don't know if this is something that you guys do typically on these meetups, but if you know how to rename yourself, I'd love for you to add in maybe like take away your last name and put the location of where you are. Sometimes what we do in our classes also is we add a third word, which is just like how you're feeling right now. So I'm going to do it myself. I know that we're going to break out into breakout groups a bunch on this call, so we will likely lose these tags, but feel free to always rename yourself if you want to. So I'm Alex, I'm in Denver, Colorado, and I am feeling, what am I feeling today? I don't know, it's like a little bit of anxiety. This whole time period right now, this whole year has basically been like an anxious year, and today's really no different. So I'm gonna own my anxiety and own how I'm feeling. And pronouns, great. Max, if you wanna add in pronouns, absolutely, please do. Mine are usually default, but they're not showing up actually. Great. So I'm gonna share my screen, and can I just get some thumbs up if and when you see? Awesome. What ends up typically happening is it's really hard for me to also manage and follow all of the chat. So my colleague, Sarah Delaney, who's on here, is gonna help me navigate the chat. I will do my best to pay attention, but if there's really a burning question, feel free to tag Sarah Delaney as well. And she can help make sure that I'm seeing the questions. And slides look okay, yeah? Great.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're gonna dive in today to this topic of designing for equity, inclusion, and impact. And one of the reasons I was really anxious, or I am really anxious today, is that as I've been preparing this, there's just so much to say and there's so much to talk about, and it felt like this completely overwhelming, daunting task. And so I'm hoping I don't completely fail the group today, but I also want to acknowledge that there's just so much more we could do together in this topic than what we're going to be able to accomplish in this short 2-hour period. So I hope everyone can come at this with a bit of compassion and empathy for a tremendous topic, trying to really feel actionable and accessible in as many ways as possible. This agenda has shifted slightly. I made some last minute changes to how we're gonna run the workshop today, but we are gonna spend a bit of time right now connecting with each other and just getting to know each other a bit. I think it's really important just to make some human interaction moment. I will share a few slides, setting a bit of context, but one of the first things we're gonna do is jump into small breakout rooms and actually have a conversation and just really source knowledge from all of you. You'll see in a moment, I really try and both honor and also like embody my lived and my learned experiences, and everyone on this call has something to say, some experience to share with relation to this topic. So we really want to try and start sourcing some of those stories and those experiences as quickly as possible. And then after that first discussion and a share out, then I will go back and share some more detailed content from our experiences at Grid Impact and in my career. Again, both my learned and lived experiences. And then we'll do one more small breakout session, maybe getting a little bit more tactile, a little bit more strategic in some of the conversations. And then we'll really open it up for discussion. And I'm hoping that we'll have a nice chunk of time at the end for questions, answers, and what I call discussion. Because you'll know very quickly, I do not pretend that I have all the answers at all. I feel like I'll do a lot of learning from all of you as well. So I will do my best to share resources and connect everyone with other humans that are really smart on this topic. But hopefully we can source some of the community insight and knowledge in this group tonight as well. Does that sound okay for a plan? Are people ready to chat with each other? Okay, so just a bit about me. Why have I been given the privilege of the microphone, the proverbial Zoom microphone today? I already see a typo on my first slide. How about that for vulnerability? So I'm a social science researcher and a behavioral designer. I'm actually a trained behavioral economist. That's really where my background comes from. But I've been working in participatory research and collaborative community co-design since 2001. It's been my entire career. I've only ever worked in the social impact space. I am proud to say I have been able to create a career, and really a robust, interesting career, where I'm able to pick and choose projects and organizations to work with that really are trying to leave the world a better place. I really identify as multidisciplinary. I have an economics background, but also an anthropology and ethnography background. I've studied psychology, I've studied design, I've studied social justice and social activism and community organizing. And as I mentioned before, I really try and embody in my work both my lived and learned experiences. And my lived experiences have, I mean, it's a lot of personal stuff, and we'll probably get into it later as we start to discuss all of the different things that we want to bring into designing for equity, inclusion, and impact. But it has to do with where I grew up, how I grew up, the kinds of opportunities that my family gave me in their careers in social justice and social activism. And it definitely informs how I identify maybe more publicly, which is I definitely identify as a rabble rouser and a critic. I really, because of my privilege, I really believe that I have to use my privilege to affect change, number one, and number two, to be a real critic, a real vocal voice. And it means that sometimes I don't make a whole lot of friends, but I don't believe that my purpose on the planet in this life is to leave with a whole bunch of friends. I do want to try and affect change. And that means that I'm really critical of the design discipline. I'm really critical of design for social impact as a discipline. And I believe that we can all do better and be better in our work. And that's something that I think we'll talk about a bit today as well. And I'm in Colorado, although I'm born and raised in New York City and identify as a New Yorker forever. But I moved out here for a variety of like self-care and health and wellness reasons. And it's working. So if anyone's ever passing through Colorado, please come and spend time. And if you want to connect on the Twitters, those are the Twitters. Okay, so I founded about 7 years ago an organization called Grid Impact. We're a social enterprise. I'm really not going to talk about Grid too much today. If you want to learn more, you could ask Letitia, who's on the call, who joined one of our hangouts the other day. We host monthly hangouts if you want to learn more about social impact design and behavioral design and our work. But our purpose, what we try and do, is we use participatory research and design to co-create equitable, inclusive, and impactful approaches to economic, health, and social challenges. It's a bunch of words, I realize, but we're also really trying to honor intentional language choices. So this sentence used to say solutions, as an example. And a lot of work in the equity design space has been to really be careful about what kinds of words we're using. And so this is the updated version of really what our mission statement is and what our purpose is. We don't purport to always come up with solutions. Solutions are also extremely like binary in just the what's behind that word. What we really try and do and how we see ourselves, we are facilitators of process to support organizations and communities in collaborative and participatory research and design experiences. And if that leads to new programs or products or services or experiences that hopefully have a positive social impact, that's a win for us. But to be really honest, we do not always get it right. I'll probably cuss on this, and I apologize in advance, but I just caught myself about to cuss. It might come out later. I apologize in advance. But we really mess up, and we really try and be honest and very transparent and very open about when we make mistakes. And we're going to talk today a bit about good intentions and impact, and how just because you have good intentions it's not good enough. And so I want to honor that we do have good intentions in our work, and we still mess up, and we have to own and be accountable to those mistakes. And happy to always talk about where we've messed up. And I'll probably talk about some of that tonight. Just from a discipline perspective, we work in financial inclusion, economic empowerment, WASH, climate change, conservation, global health, ag, food systems, housing, transportation equity. We're pretty discipline neutral. And we work globally around the world to try and affect positive change. And I start all of our sessions with a land acknowledgement, Indigenous land acknowledgement. If you're not familiar with it, please feel free to just be with me in this slide. I'm just gonna read it just to honor the land that I currently sit on, which is in Colorado, in Denver, Colorado. I sit on Arapaho, Cheyenne, Ute, and Sioux people land. This land was forcibly taken from them. And oftentimes we talk about Indigenous peoples as a past tense, that they existed, but they still exist, and they still live here, and they still are on this land. They are not extinct. And naming this and calling this out in any kind of public session, and I encourage everyone to do the research and do this as well, but naming this is an exercise in power when what is being named has been historically erased. So we take a minute to really acknowledge the land that we're sitting on. And this helps us to not only increase awareness and acknowledgement, but also to feel the discomfort of saying this out loud and experiencing it in a vocal way. So I wanna just publicly be held accountable to all of you, that I wanna commit myself to the struggle against the systems of oppression that have dispossessed Indigenous people of their lands and denied their rights. So just take a moment to consider the many legacies of violence, displacement, migration, and settlement that bring us together today, and join me in uncovering such truths at any and all public events. And happy to talk offline with people about Indigenous land acknowledgements if needed. All right, we are going to, Sarah, would you do me a favor and drop the link in the chat? One of the things that always happens at these kinds of Zoom virtual networking experiences is the last 5 to 10 minutes, everyone is frantically typing in their LinkedIn and their email and their Twitter handles because everyone wants to connect. And it always stresses me out because I always I'm scrolling and trying to find people and it never works. So in the chat, there is a link to a Google spreadsheet. This is totally voluntary. You do not have to put your information in here. But if you want to be able to connect with folks later, feel free to add your information here. And this will just be a resource that everyone can have access to. You do not have to share your information with anyone, but just want to hopefully reduce the anxiety and stress in the last few minutes of everyone trying to connect with each other. Okay. So I think Alba's on the call. Alba's going to see her name and maybe be surprised, but I just want to acknowledge some of the individuals, and later on in the deck you'll see some organizations that I'm going to point everyone to for more resources and more learning. But just want to point everyone to a few individuals that really have informed my thinking in a variety of ways on issues related to the design discipline, human-centered design more broadly, equity design, really just BIPOC experiences, and how to be a better researcher and how to be a better, all of a sudden, indeed I was. If you are not following these folks either in their professional endeavors, the folks on the left tend to do a lot of writing and publishing. Bucky's dead, so he's not doing any more writing. But if you haven't read Bucky's work, I recommend it. And the folks on the right are living, breathing beings who post on LinkedIn and Twitter and Instagram And they're all pretty incredible humans that I really look to for inspiration and guidance, and also to correct me when I mess up, which again is pretty frequently. So just to call out some of the folks whose insights you'll likely see and experience on this talk. Okay. Show of like hands, either like digital hands or physical hands. Has anyone here ever experienced liberating structures as a facilitation practice? Oh, cool. At least I saw one hand. I saw Brian raise his hand. I just happened to be scrolling through. We're going to do a liberating structure experience. Oh, Antonio as well. Great. We're going to use impromptu networking just for a few minutes to just connect everyone together and get to know each other. The way this is going to work is I am hopefully going to put you all into little breakout rooms of 3 people each. Some of you might have a duo, some of you might have a foursome. We'll see what happens with the Zoom system. And I'm gonna copy and paste, or maybe Sarah can help me with this. We're gonna copy and paste the invitation into the chat. And you're just gonna have a really quick, like 3 to 4 minute conversation. It's very just initial instinct reactions to the prompt. And we're gonna do this twice. So you're gonna be put into your first triad and we'll have about 4 minutes. And then we're gonna come back and then I'm gonna push you all out into another triad. You'll have another 4 minutes and then we'll come back and then we're gonna debrief a little bit about what you heard and what you experienced. And the invitation, which we'll put into the chat so you can reference it again, is when you hear the words equity, inclusion, and impact, what comes to mind? Is there an image or a metaphor, an example, a movement? Maybe there's like an embodied practice, but anything that comes to mind for you when you hear those 3 words together: equity, inclusion, and impact. And we are going to, there's 57 people who can do math. 57 divided by 3. 18 rooms, 19 rooms. Let's try it. It's totally random. I don't know who's getting assigned where. And if for some reason it doesn't work and you're stuck with us here, we will try and assign you. Okay. And I'm going to give you a timer. I really like having a timer. And there'll be a minute warning when you are coming close to the end, okay? So again, just have a really impromptu, informal conversation. If you want to introduce yourselves, feel free. But just share what comes up for you with those 3 words. All right, let's see if it works. I love seeing everyone like leaving. Hey, Brian. Brian's still here. Carol's still here. Carol, you need to go somewhere. I got to put you somewhere. Do you want to be in a room, Carol? I'm going to put you in 6. And then Galaxy S7. I don't know where you're supposed to be. Galaxy S7, do you see an invitation to join the breakout room? Welcome back. Are you back from your breakout room? Yes.
No, I just joined in.
Oh, you just joined. Okay. Hang out a second. You'll join the next one.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Welcome. Welcome back. Welcome back. Oh my goodness, Emily, you should be grateful. You're sitting on a beach. Oh my goodness.
That's bad, yeah.
Welcome back, folks. Okay. We're still waiting for some of our breakout rooms to come back.
Hi.
Hello.
Is it just us? Oh, sorry. I'm swiping now.
Welcome.
Thank you. My name's Edel. I'm from Ireland, but I'm in Toronto now.
Okay. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Okay, I think everyone's back from their breakout rooms. I'm going to send you all back. We're going to do another round. So same prompt. You're going to probably get new people. For those of you that are just joining, your teammates will let you know what's going on. Okay, let's see. So same prompt, and it's in the chat, and I'll copy and paste it for those of you that joined a little bit late. We're going to go into a breakout room in just 3-4 minutes, and then we're going to debrief. So Selena, Maria, okay, Selena's gone. Maria and Galaxy S7, you'll just need to join your breakout room if you can. welcome back. Hey, Clarissa. Antonio. Clarissa, you're in Wisconsin. Great.
Yes, I am.
Awesome. Jenna's in Brooklyn, but wishing Jenna was somewhere else in a painting.
Or a Miyazaki movie, maybe.
Nice. Very good. All right, we're just waiting for a few more. Not that I can tell, actually. Oh, no, I think we're close. Okay, I think everyone's back.
Yes, I confirm that.
Can you tell? Okay, thanks. I only have like certain views when I'm sharing.
Yeah,
my
go ahead. It's 59 now. Yeah, it's
Great.
we are all 6. Yeah.
Perfect. Thanks. Welcome back, everyone. Okay, so I'd love to hear a bit about what you all learned. Just to start, if everyone has access to the chat function in Zoom, I'd love whatever was present for you. Something you heard, something you said that you want to amplify in the full group, an image link that you want us to look at, whatever came up for you, feel free. So just to remind everyone, the invitation was when you hear the words equity, inclusion, and impact, what comes to mind? I'm looking for like images, examples, metaphors, and let's all just take a moment and share and also read what everyone else is sharing and just be in it. And if for any reasons it is more accessible or easy for someone to speak their share, please feel free to unmute yourself and speak, and we can popcorn if voice is an easier avenue for anyone. Oh, Bianca shared a comic. Ah, yes, famous comic. Guys, these are wonderful reflections. God, where's Max? I gotta give some snaps to Max. Oh my goodness, these are amazing. And there's so many different angles that you all talked about. Every group took a totally different approach to sharing and digging in. And Elisa, what a gift for the Medium post, I feel like, this source. Inclusion, a sea of one color marbles and a few different colored one. Oh, I love that. Inclusion, a pair of arms opening wide to embrace. These are beautiful visuals, guys. Belonging. Belonging, belonging. Okay. Agency. Oh, fire. So there was some anger in one of the groups, or maybe more of the, many of the groups, possibly. Awesome. Does anyone want to, just to give space, verbalize anything? Okay. If you do, let me know. What a gift. I really appreciate you all sharing, and just the diversity of opinion and perspective and metaphors and visuals and imagery. It's really inspiring, actually.
I actually like Kyle's comment about a good cultural fit, because you hear that a lot in jobs. And I don't know, maybe we could have some dialogue around that.
Yeah, we've talked about that at work, that's actually a negative thing when you think about cultural fit, like Uber being like a bro culture. Do you want a cultural fit with the rest of the bros? Like, you want more diversity than having like everyone be the same. So we've gone back and forth in my community about that, but I'm curious what others think.
Yeah, I think, well, let's work through a little bit. And I think that's a great question, Christina, for us to dig into in the Q&A and D. Culture add over culture fit. Yeah. Oh, wow. 2 of you wrote that at the exact same time. Yeah, I think it's a super problematic term, super problematic, and we can definitely dig into it. Awesome. Okay, while you guys are also in your small discussion groups, I'm gonna go back into the chat history and keep reading because it's just so much. It's a lot of content. So let me do a little bit of context setting. And I wanna start by, so I mentioned in my introduction, I've been doing related work in this space since 2001, 19 years. And I mentioned that I'm multidisciplinary. And I just want to honor what the foundations and some of the antecedents for me in designing for equity, inclusion, and impact are. And it's super complicated. And I was talking to my colleague, Sarah, who's on the call earlier about this. I think this long list of disciplines and methods and academic theoretical areas just shows how there's no place to come at designing for equity from. There is no right or singular background. It takes a ton of work. And as I've already mentioned, I mess up all the time and I still have a ton of work to do myself. But these are some of the disciplines and the foundations and the antecedents that have informed my practices, my understanding, my awareness, my personal behaviors, my professional behaviors, and some of the methods and processes that we use at Grid Impact in our work. We have been evolving our methodology to really include more of some of these non-traditional maybe, or like lived experience disciplines like community organizing. It's something that is in a lot of our backgrounds at Grid Impact, but we're finding ways to actually build it into our more formal processes with our partners and our clients. And we talk a lot, and actually Alba and Sarah Fatala and I have had conversations around like trauma-informed research or trauma-informed design. And where we're actually shifting now is towards something called healing-centered engagement, which we can talk about a little bit later, and I'll share some resources. But there are lots of different disciplines that really inform the practice of designing for equity and designing for inclusion and conducting participatory research. And these are just a few of the disciplines that I feel like I draw from on a pretty regular basis in my work. Okay, so I don't know how many of you attended George's session last month. I'm not going to talk about all of the reasons that systems are inequitable. I'm hoping that everyone on the call has some awareness and understanding of just how messed up everything is. But I'm just going to do a really quick summary of what I believe some of the context setting is. So I'm just going to review a little bit of what we feel like we know. Everything in the world is designed, absolutely everything. Whether it's intentionally designed or not, every choice is, say it, thank you, Kara or Kara, I don't know how you pronounce your name, but thank you for giving me permission. I will, it'll come out, I can't hold it back. I'm filled with rage and anger myself, so it'll come out in some way. So everything in the world is designed. I think we can all agree to that, if a lot of you are designers. How systems, services, experiences, and products are designed may either intentionally or unintentionally exclude people, places, and things. We're going to really center our conversation today around people, but know that we spend a lot of time thinking about context and environment and physical space as well, and that is, and the environment. We do a lot of work in the environment, so those things are also important, but we're going to talk about people today. So people often get excluded because of how systems and experiences and paradigms and whatever are designed, right? Maybe worse, maybe not worse. How systems, services, experiences, and products are designed may unintentionally or unintentionally harm people. So it's oftentimes not just exclusionary, but oftentimes it's really harmful. And I'm being a little bit gentle in my language here. We could probably go a lot further in talking about harm and talking about really how harm may result in death, right? It's not even just emotional wounds. It's actual huge implications of harm. Good intentions, and this is something we'll talk a lot about today, good intentions do not inherently translate into positive impact. Just because an organization or a team or a person has good intentions does not mean that the impact is good. And we'll dig into this later, but this is something that we hear a lot, like, well, the intention was good, the process was intended to be inclusive, but, and there's always these buts, and the buts are not okay. We have to solve for the buts. It's not okay if there's negative impact or if there are unintended consequences. And then finally, and this is to quote George, thanks Brad, HCD is not inherently good. There's been for a long time this assumption that because something goes through a design process that is human-centered, it must be better than the thing that was there before. I would be remiss if I did not say the thing that I've become known for saying. Just because something is designed does not mean that it is better than what was there before. If you do not measure and track and evaluate the impact of the thing you are designing, you have no idea if you have created positive impact in anyone's life, their community, the system, whatever. And designers, and this is where the critic, the Alex the critic comes in, designers are not really trained in measuring impact. Maybe some UX designers know how to do A/B testing and more like tech-based evaluations, but most designers, if they go to design school, are not taught impact evaluation, not taught rigorous monitoring and evaluation techniques. And so people think that because something is designed with intentionality, it is better. Bullshit. Bullshit, bullshit, bullshit. There we go. I've unleashed. So I don't know if anyone here is familiar with Dr. Emma Rose's work. She is at the University of Washington. She's written some amazing stuff in the space, and these are some of the resources that I promise I will share at the end of this. Designers have this is from a paper she wrote, designers have a responsibility and obligation to account for the ways in which their work can impact people. This is like fundamental to our work at Grid Impact. It's fundamental to my career. And I frankly believe it should be fundamental to everyone's work and everyone's lives, personal or professional. I didn't see what Brad said, but he's getting lots of +1s, so I'm sure I would +1 it too. With that frame of we need, as designers, we need to be very cognizant of the impact of our work on others, on systems, on places, on people, on things, on the environment. I think that there are a bunch, I mean, there's so many critical questions to be asking. Here are a few. These are gonna inform our first small group breakout sessions. You're probably asking yourself similar questions. So this is not gonna be anything new, but I just wanna call these out. So who, either intentionally or unintentionally, is being left out of the process, of the approach, of the conversation, of the whatever? Someone is being left out. Who is it? Can we name them? Can we identify, is it a population of people? Is it a community? Is it an individual? Are there certain characteristics that we can name? Who is doing the designing? And I should have put designing in quotation marks. How are things being designed? What are the methods, the techniques? How is the reason? And we're going to talk about all of this. This is what we're going to dig into in the meat of the session. And what is the impact of these choices? The choices you make as a designer about your methods, not even the thing you're designing, but your methods have tremendous impact on people and communities. How does a research or design process reinforce existing structures of exclusion and/or power? And again, I'm not even talking about the quote unquote solutions or the interventions or the final products. I'm still just talking about your process. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna start to unpack process decisions that we can make as designers to try and drive towards better inclusion, equity, and impact. And then finally, on a very personal level, what is my role in this system of oppression and exclusion? Can I use my position to shift resources and power to those with the greater need? That was so unintentional, Christina, but I'm going to pretend like it was intentional. But what a great design idea that I will now use going forward. Thank you. But it's a really good idea. I'm going to do that going forward. So what is my role? And even if you identify an affinity group that often lacks power in a system, if you are participating in a research and or design process, you likely have some power in that experience. To name what your power is or what your role is a really important part of the process. So we are going to break into small groups. I've told you nothing yet, I realize. I've given you no new knowledge, but that's okay because you have all answers already. And my job as a facilitator is just to unleash your wisdom. So we're going to break out into small groups and we're going to talk about either of these questions or both. And I'm going to give you guys about 10 minutes, actually, maybe 15 even, depending on how we're going. I'm giving you 2 questions because sometimes a question really doesn't resonate with a group, and so I want you to have some choice, but I'd love for you to try and stick to one of these questions, and if you want to explore both, go for it. But I'll just read these out loud. Have you observed a research or design process that successfully removed barriers or inequities? If you've seen something that worked, I'd love for you to tell your group how that happened. What were the choices, the process decisions that were made that allowed those barriers to be removed or those inequities to be rebalanced? And I will, Sarah and I will copy and paste these questions into the chat again so you still have access to them. The second question is more personal. And again, if you don't feel like sharing, please don't feel pressured in any way. But how might I use my position to shift resources and power to those with the greater need? And if you can get specific about a tactic that you feel like you could do, I'd love to start generating, let this be generative. Let this be a bit of like an ideation. Maybe you haven't tried it in the past, but you have an idea of how you might be able to do something. So we're gonna do some small groups. Anyone have any questions about these 2 invitations, these 2 questions? I feel like I'm hearing someone. No? Okay. I'm gonna recreate these rooms. It's gonna be groups of either 3 or 4 people. And just spend, I'm gonna put this at like 10 minutes and we'll check in, okay? And we'll see how we're doing at 10 minutes. And the questions are in the chat. Bye, Amy, thank you so much. AJ, I'm gonna put you in a room. I will put you in 10. Assign to 10. Okay.
I'm actually in a so
I can't hear you. Oh, you're in a room?
no, I'm in an elevator.
Oh, hi AJ, how are you? I think I see you.
So is that gonna work? Or
You just have to accept going into a room on your Zoom app.
okay, I do that. Oh, I was saying thank you.
No worries. Okay, great. So I'm at 5 p.m. Welcome back. Hey, Letitia.
Hello. I accidentally clicked the.
I do it all the time. I do it
Or we're like, oh, we have a minute, and then I'm like, no.
all the time. I do it all the time.
Oops. Yeah. So anyway, that means I gotta say hello.
How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good. Trying to manage the Zoom and the slides.
Doing a great job.
Oh my.
You're doing so great. Managing all these things. I'm already lost.
Antonio, I didn't know you were my Napoli brother, by the way.
Yes, just came here recently, actually.
No.
I'm very new. No, I'm not very new. I've been here 5 years. So.
All right.
So
You're tracking.
Yes, 57. Yeah, you can. Yeah, I think we can restart. Yeah.
All right. Welcome back, everyone. Brian's smiling. I hope that both Brians are smiling, actually. Oh, we got two Brians. They're both smiling. Okay. How was the conversation? Did you converse? Okay, cool. Even with the count, I know the transitions are so hard. I know. Zoom was not prepared for the global pandemic with their interface, I think. Like, they did not understand how much we were all going to rely on this experience. Okay, well, I'd love to hear some of what came up for you. So however you feel, I would love for some folks to share in the chat, because then we have this institutional record and we'll help Elisa when she's writing the recap of the session. So if people want to share anything via chat, but also if anyone wants to unmute themselves and share an insight that, or a story or what have you. I think if we're sharing verbally, let's just try and mind time and keep it nice and pithy and concise if possible. So I will create some space and time, and we've got a few minutes for this.
I can share something verbally because I don't want this in writing.
Okay, great. It is being recorded, Brad. Just
okay, that's fine, whatever. One of the things that, so in a position in my career where I have been and will be hiring for the foreseeable future, I make my bias very explicit to those that are part of my hiring process, that I would prefer to hire somebody that does not look like me, right? Like, I don't want to hire another white male because I want to have a diverse set of opinions and backgrounds and perspectives in all the work that we do. So it's not a hard and fast rule, obviously, because that would not be cool, but it's something that I factor into my decisions, and it's something that I try to do to empower those that, you know, aren't like me.
Great.
In our group, both Brad and Sarah talked about how in research, the idea of compensating participants, and also Brad brought up this, sorry to call you out, Brad, but about this idea of like the correct type of compensation. And, you know, not everybody wants to support the company that you're giving them a gift card to, or not everyone has access to that. So thinking about alternative ways, and the idea, can I share your idea? Well, he said that his organization, his company offers to give donations to a charity selection of your choice, as opposed to a Starbucks gift card or something. So yeah, I thought that was incredible, because that is something to like really think about. And also then he and his company is having also like spreading that as well, like doing double, but I guess no way. So
very cool. And we'll talk, you'll see compensation coming up in just a few slides. So I'm glad you mentioned it. Christina, please come off of mute and share.
I kind of feel like him too, being even on the other side of it, because, you know, there's a fear, right? Trying to keep it as cryptic as possible, I guess. There was a informal interview I had with somebody, and they were basically trying to figure out what my why I was interested in inclusive design, and that they insinuated that they would have, that they were gonna basically, for lack of a better word, give more points to someone who was more diversified. You know, in whatever sense they were diversified, not necessarily accessibility.
Mm-hmm.
And that made me, you know, it put a bad taste in my mouth.
Sure.
And part of that is because, say I had a disability, if I said I did, then I would have more of a chance with a equal candidate than if I didn't. But if I say I didn't, then, you know, and then what is like this imaginary point system for what disability, you know, earns more points or something. I mean, there was no point system, but I'm just saying, like, where does that, you know, thinking land?
Thank you for sharing. I think we've got time for one more verbal, and Alba's going to share a tactic.
Yeah, so hi everyone. This is Alba. One of the problems and challenges I think of doing work in the social impact space is sustainability. And so something that I have really tried to do in my work is that when I'm doing research, I not only take my stakeholders out into the field with me, I take people who are going to be the quote unquote end users. Because the idea is that not only can this expose them to new skills, but once I leave, not only do they know how to do the work themselves, but their names are on all the documents that I shared with my stakeholders. So they are the experts. There doesn't need to be a new external design guru to come in and clean up. It's for the community and by the community, and they're the ones who have ownership over the project because they actually did participate in it with me.
Completely. And Alba, so double click to that at Grid. We actually like build in, more often than not, doesn't always work out because of project constraints, but all of our projects are basically set up as like capacity building engagements where we are attempting to either build capacity of community members who can then execute research and design work, or if we have a partner organization, staff that can then have those skills going forward. And part of the reason we can do that is we are we're a collective organization. It's not like a formal organization with tons of overhead, and we don't need to be around in 5 to 10 years. So if we are building capacity around the world for folks to do the kind of work that we do, then that's actually us succeeding in our mission. But we have to set those terms really early on in the project scoping with the client, because if it's not included at the outset, there's no way it'll happen going forward. Okay, cool. There's a couple more examples here. I'm gonna just, for the sake of time, keep moving through some of the slides, but if you wanna share more stories, please do, because this chat will be shared afterwards and we will all have this institutional record together. Okay, so you might have come to like hear how we do things, maybe, I don't know, or maybe not, but I'm gonna share a little bit about how we do some stuff. Maybe frustratingly, I'm gonna leave you with more questions than answers, but we'll find out. Maybe not. Maybe we'll have solutions. I don't know. I tend to use a super simple framework for thinking about how to design my research or design process. Because yes, you design a design process, if that's not the most meta thing you've heard. But I use this framework I'm about to show you, super simple framework, to think about all the things that I think I should be thinking about to make sure that we are designing for equity, designing for inclusion, and ultimately designing for, in parentheses, positive impact. It's just the who, what, where, how, when, and why framework, real simple. But we're gonna start with the why, because the why is the most important. So a couple of questions that I like to ask at the outset of any kind of new engagement, whether it's a fee-for-service contract or a board position I'm gonna take or a pro bono project that I'm gonna do as an individual, doesn't matter. But what is the purpose of this work? Who defined the scope of work? What was the process to determining the scope of work? Why are we even doing this, whatever, research, design, whatever the project is? To what end and for whose benefit? Oftentimes, who's benefiting is like in a social impact world at least, it's like a foundation or an organization that doesn't necessarily mean that the positive impact will be held in the community necessarily. Why was this specific challenge or problem area chosen? And how was it chosen? Who chose it, right? Like there's a lot of power in the problem definition phase of the human-centered design methodology. Who gets to say what the problem is? And then ultimately, like, why is this work happening now? What was it that catalyzed the work? And why us? Like, why are we being asked to do it? And sometimes the answer is like, it shouldn't be us. And it is my responsibility as the conductor of this grid impact collective to say, not us, we gotta walk away. There's someone better suited for this work, or we are not suited for it because. And that requires a lot of work on my ego and the collective's ego to be able to say no. And what's really important to us also is who is sourcing the work. Is the client paying for the work, meaning that they really want to do this, or is there a foundation or some sort of money source funding an organization to work with us? Because that also creates really strange power dynamics and really difficult working scenarios. So these are just some of the why questions. I know that they're not all why questions, but they're all related to the why of the work that I find helpful in reflecting early on. And what are some ways that you and we can explore this and like tactically do this kind of in our work? So a really tangible thing is to host participatory alignment meetings in community. So even before signing any kind of scope of work or agreeing to what the problem frame is, the problem definition, having conversations in community about the problem, because probably the problem that the organization thinks is the problem is not really the thing that the community wants to be working on. That happens 8 out of 10 times. We use something called a project charter, which helps, and I'm going to show you an example of it in a second, which helps us ground, focus, and understand context, and also create some agreements with whoever we're working with. And I'll show you a project charter in just a second, but it's a document that is an informal agreement between us and whoever we're working with to make sure that we're really clear on scope and expectations and objectives and whatnot. And the biggest thing I can say for like the why questions is time. Like it takes time to do this. So if you're under some insane deadline that there's no reason for, that someone's putting like a rushed project timeline on something, this is where you have to use your power and privilege, if you have it in the context, to push back, slow things down. We try and take a whole lot of time up front before we're signing contracts, really working things out with our clients and our partners before we get caught up in execution. And Sarah and I have lots of examples where we maybe said yes before we should have, and like it burned, it really burned. And we had to rescope, and we had to do this tug of war in power dynamics and in information and IP and all that kind of stuff. So take the time up front to sort this stuff out. So this is just an example of, yes, RFP, we can talk about RFPs, oh my God. Project charter. So this is just an example. They take different forms for different clients and different projects, but we try and document in writing so that everyone on the project has access to it. And it's really like an informal agreement what some of the context of the work is. So what are the objectives of the work? What's the overview of the project? Can we get really clear on what we're trying to do? Everyone fills out this. We will all feel this project was a success if ... Confidentiality requirements, just to make sure we're protecting clients, users, humans, whoever. Opportunities and inspiration. We try and find other sources of inspiration that will figure into the work. Identifying risks, constraints, roadblocks early on. Who's going to get in our way? What's going to get in our way? Can we try and think about some of the stuff that will happen later on? How we want to engage in meetings and communications, like what are the expectations around just like team communication and interpersonal dynamics, roles and responsibilities, and then getting really clear on deliverables and milestones. And it's not that this thing is set in stone, it changes, but it really helps early on to make sure we're clear on what the why is and where all of like the antecedents of the work, what those are and where it's coming from. Okay, now let's go into the who, what, where, how, when. Who? Whom do you work for? What are their intentions and objectives? Who are the decision makers and the power holders? Can you name them? Can you identify them? You can't always. You might have some hypotheses. Who gets to participate in the process? Whether it's a research process or a design process, doesn't matter, whatever the process is. How are these individuals and communities selected? When are they invited in? And someone put in the chat earlier this idea of like invite them to the table, how that's super problematic language. That's exactly why this word invited is in quotations here, because like even that is a power dynamic itself. Who's deciding who's invited, right? And if folks are invited after the project scoping, after that why phase has happened, it's usually too late. Here it is again. Thank you, Bianca. Yes, I did click on that. That's exactly right. Who gets to inform what the challenge or problem is? Again, this is similar to what we were talking about in the why questions, but like who gets to decide what the parameters are of the work? Who should be held accountable for ensuring action is taken? I can't tell you in the social impact space, especially internationally, how many times we have done all this work in community, we've taken up all this time from community members, and then the organization, typically a nonprofit, does not follow through with implementation. And it's like we have raised expectations so high, and now we are completely failing the organization. Who is accountable to that? And then finally, who is represented on your team of researchers and designers? Are these the right, quote unquote, right individuals? Are you the right team to do this work? And this goes again to what I said before. Sometimes the answer is no. So we made a decision as Grid Impact 2 years ago, 3 years ago at this point, I guess, to stop working in Kenya. We do, even though we have Kenyan collective members who live in Nairobi, there are so many other local organizations that can do great research and design work. It does not need to be a global north, US based, despite us being like a fully dispersed, fully remote organization, doesn't need to be us. So there are countries, entire markets where we're like, it doesn't need to be us. And it was really hard to say because Kenya is a market where there's tons of social impact design work to do, but like, doesn't need to be us. It can be ideo.org, it can be Busara, it can be Skymark, it can be any number of local teams. And if you aren't the right team, who is and how? Yes. So we are super big on referring. Oh, so you need to do some work in Kenya. Here's our list of folks that we feel like can do really excellent work, and here we'll make referrals. I spend more time referring than saying yes to projects, quite honestly. And again, that's a power and a privilege of mine after building up, a portfolio of work over years. But that feels way better than flying in, doing some work, not as well as local talent will do it, and having a really great network who feels supported by some lady in Colorado who recommends them. Okay, so a couple of like the tactics for who. Broaden the participant pool to include a more representative group of individuals. Sometimes this means like really convincing your partner to go broader in the participant who than they think is important, than they think is necessary. Compensate participants, just to like double click what Brad and Sarah were talking about. You need to be paying people to answer your questions. You need to be paying people to respond to your designs, your prototypes, whatever you're doing, you need to pay them. What the payment looks like should be tailored to the participant. So we have a project right now in Colorado focused on really like underinvested communities from a leadership perspective. And I know it's crazy that it has to be said, Max, but it does. It's unbelievable. Our client that Sarah and I are working with, didn't occur to them to pay participants to do research with us. I work at an organization called Grid Impact, Christina, Grid Impact. We have a project here in Colorado right now where we just ask the participant as we're setting up the interview, how would you like to be compensated? We're going to give you X amount of dollars. Would you like it Venmo? Would you like it? We'll hand you cash. We will like figure out a way to get you physical cash. We work a lot with undocumented immigrants who do not want money transiting through the bank account that they have for a variety of reasons. Sometimes they ask for a gift card. Great. It's our job to figure out how to make that happen. The onus should not be on the participant to like get a Target gift card and then be bummed that it's a Target gift card. That's our work. We have to do that work. Open up meetings and activities so that community can actually participate. This sometimes means, and this happened to us on a project in Colorado last year, this sometimes means that you have like 300 people showing up for a community ideation workshop. And it's like, as the facilitator, I'm freaking out internally because like 300 humans at a public library to do like ideation together. Oh shit, like that's a lot. Guess what? Not their problem, my problem. I gotta figure it out, not them. They wanna be involved, fantastic. Please come be involved. I have to now adjust my plan and figure out how to make it work for 300 people. This is a really important one to me, actually. Allow participants to bring a trusted friend or family member. So I'm just gonna tell you a quick story. We have a project that we worked on last year and the year before in Colorado, actually, around sexual health of Latino teenagers. The original, doesn't matter what the original project was, but it had to do with sexual empowerment, sexual health, sexual awareness. It had a lot to do with family and place and culture, actually, and it was a very complicated project. And we were talking to teenagers about sex, and sometimes about sexual assault, and sometimes about family sexual assault, and really difficult topics. And we made a decision really early on to say, if you want to meet with us one-on-one, we're happy to hold space for you one-on-one. But if you prefer to actually come and bring a friend, bring a friend. The 4 young men on the bottom left, they came as a foursome. They were like, we are 4 best friends. We will talk to you as a foursome. It didn't exactly align with our intended research methodology, but guess what? Guess whose problem that is? That's my problem. That's not their problem. If they feel more comfortable coming in a foursome, fantastic, we'll make it work. And we had a great time. They were super fun. Another thing on the Who, on this particular project, these are all images from the same project. We did something on this project that we will now do for every single project going forward, especially here in the United States. The top 3, the women on the photo, the 3 women on the top left photo are all women from Pueblo, which is one of the cities in Colorado that we're doing this project in. It's a heavily Latino community, mostly Chicano, but also some mostly Mexican immigrants. And because our project was focused on Latino youth and sexual health, we did this thing, which I think Alba was actually talking about in a sense in her comment earlier. We hired these individuals as team members, as what we call design fellows. So these 3 women are actually community organizers. The woman in the middle is a Mexican immigrant. She does community organizing work. She's a social activist. The one on the right does a lot of health equity work, but she identifies as a community organizer. And the one on the left ran the local Boys and Girls Club, and then transitioned to work at one of the local foundations supporting health equity issues. We hired them on this project, paid them the same that we were getting paid, same day rate that we were getting paid, to be our in-community design partners. They had never worked on human-centered design before, but again, like building capacity, it's the best thing we can do. I'm now working on another project with the 2 women on the right, totally different project in a different part of Colorado, because they've now been trained up in design, in research, and they're bringing in this community organizing perspective, the social justice perspective. So there are lots of ways to make sure that you're building equitable teams and representative teams, not just in like how we look and like what our backgrounds are, but actually like in the communities that we're working with. Okay, the what. What are we learning about? Or researching, that should say, sorry. It's my COVID brain. What are the boundaries of the work? How is the scope defined? Do you really need to ask that question? How many times have you put in questions in your interview guide that were like tangential, that you kind of wanted to know about, but like really weren't important or really weren't central to the topic? I've had clients so many times like oh, we have this other project on savings. Could we ask some questions about savings too? And it's like, we could, but why are we doing it? And is it in service of this scope? And if it's not, we are wasting the participants' time. If you want to talk to the participant about savings, pay them another $100 and talk to them about savings. Exactly, whose needs are being centered? The provider or the client or the participant? Absolutely. What are you doing to protect the participants' privacy and data? We could have a whole session just on privacy and data, couldn't we? I mean, my God, I'm not even gonna start this one, but it's a big one. So some of the things that we do. So take a healing-centered approach as opposed to a trauma-informed approach. And they're not either or. A healing-centered approach is just an evolution of a trauma-centered or trauma-informed approach. Dr. Sean Ginwright wrote a great piece about this that I will share in the resources about what a healing-centered approach is. But I'm just going to read a sentence about it because I think it's really important. Slides will absolutely be shared, yes. A healing-centered approach views trauma not simply as an individual isolated experience, but rather highlights the ways in which trauma and healing are experienced collectively. So it talks about the individual as part of a whole, the individual as part of a collective. Oftentimes trauma has to do with like diagnosing and then treating, and it's very individualized, but oftentimes there's collective trauma. There's community trauma that has been experienced. And so we're trying to now adopt some of these more community collective-based trauma-informed healing-centered practices that are less focused on diagnosing and treating an individual and more about what happens to an entire group of humans who experience a trauma. And quite honestly, what's going on in the US right now is a perfect example of that. Don't ask more than necessary. Like, just, if the conversation can be 20 minutes, great, let it be 20 minutes. If it's 10 questions, great, let it be 10 questions. Don't ask things just because you have someone in front of you. Don't broaden the scope just because your client is pressuring you or your boss is pressuring you to find out more from that particular person. All right, where and when? Where will you be conducting the research and design activities? Are the participants safe? Is there privacy? Oh goodness, all these typos today. I'm sorry guys, I'll fix these before I send them to you. Is their privacy protected? Do the participants have to travel to engage in the process? Is the location politicized in any way? We've gotten into trouble before, especially overseas, where we were holding a community conversation or session in what we thought was like a neutral community space, but it turns out there's a lot we don't know, and there's lots of underlying community tensions or biases, and if we hold it in X place, we're alienating Y group of people. So you have to be really thoughtful about where you're doing your research and your design work. What time of day? I know this sounds so specific and like detail oriented, but it's so important. So many people or organizations think that design is going to happen between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. No, guess what? We have like 6 a.m. sessions or 11 p.m. sessions. It might be after dinner, after the kids are asleep. It might be before they're going to work. It might be you. I have actually done an interview where I rode with someone on a bus on their commute and did the interview like on the bus to their commute. So it's our job, again, to be flexible and adaptable to make it as easy as possible for participants to engage. So maybe not surprisingly, the tips are, go to where your participants are, ask them where they feel safest to meet, and talk openly. Remain flexible and adaptable to your participants' schedules and responsibilities. Provide child care. Should I say that again? Provide child care. Provide food. Provide transportation money if they are going to be traveling somewhere. These, like, I know it doesn't sound, this is not sexy insights that I'm sharing with you, but this is the stuff that actually allows more individuals to participate in community-centered design processes or product design or service design. It is, so Emily, great point. It is made more complicated. In Pueblo, we have this leadership project that we're doing here in Colorado. We are, our two community members, my colleagues, Teresa and Yesenia, who are hosting research in Pueblo for us, they're hosting lawn sessions, front lawns, masked, sitting on the front lawn. That's it. That's where we're doing it. That's what's happening. Obviously, virtual is an option as well. But the community in Pueblo, they don't want to do Zooms. That's not how they best communicate. They want to be in person. So we go to where they are. Parking lots. There's a food bank that's handing out a ton of food in Pueblo, and Yesenia is doing interviews because she volunteers with the food bank. She's doing interviews with people who are in line at the food bank. Great, it's in a parking lot. Who cares? Like, I don't care where we have to go. It's about going to where people, where the participants feel safe and honored. If the participant wants to do the activity remotely, you make it happen. Even if you can be in person, but they want to do a phone call, you just make it happen. Maybe you don't feel like it's ideal. Maybe you're missing that like personal contact. Guess what? You gotta do what they feel comfortable with. This is a project that Sara Fatala and I did in Haiti together last year. This woman in the pink was my participant, and she initially came. She like communicated that she wanted to meet us at this one place. So we met her at this one place, and then we met up, and she was like, I think she got excited that she was getting interviewed. I don't know what the vibe was, but she was like, could I take you to my house? I'd love to show you where I live. And I was like, absolutely. I'd always rather go to someone's home. That's great. We took a boat, a canoe, and then we walked 4 miles in the heat of Haiti. And I was like, not totally prepared for the journey, but I live in Colorado. I love to hike. I mean, we went to it. And it was supposed to be, I did 4 interviews that day. I did 1 because it ended up being like an 8-hour experience with her. But she really wanted to show us where she lived. She wanted us to meet her husband and her kids. And it ended up being like a beautiful experience. But this is sort of an extreme version of like, go to where your participant wants them to go. Sorry. All right, how? I think this is the last one. What tools and methods are most appropriate for your participants? Not for you, not for your process, not for your outcomes, not for your boss, for your participants. Have you built in a diversity of accessibility methods? So audio, visual, speaking, interactive, whatever it might be. And there's lots of different things to consider here. Who will be facilitating the activities and what is their role in the local system? I'm going to give you an example in a second. Have you considered for literacy, language, class, that C word, culture? So we always try and go in with a diverse set of activities and methods so that we have options and we have backups and we can try different things depending on the person. There are times where we'll go into the field with like 5 methods and we end up only using 1. And then our client's always like, but you didn't do that activity. And it's like, well, that activity ended up not being the right activity. So it's about having options, like a tool belt of different tools, but figuring out what the right tools are to use in that moment. This is one that's really hard. I know it sounds simple, but it's so hard, but give ample time for reflection and listening. Just create space, time. This might mean scheduling multiple conversations so that participants can take time to process and come back to you a second time. On that project that I was describing earlier in Colorado around the teenage sexual health, there were a number of interviews that we ended up not being able to use in our sample because once we asked one question of these sets of young girls, the entire conversation ended up being about, let's say, a personal sexual trauma. And that was it. And we didn't get further than that. And that's the process. That's okay. Like it was clear in a few of those instances that these young women in particular had never had an opportunity to talk about their experience with anyone who would listen to them before. So guess, Alex becomes Auntie Alex in that moment, not a researcher. I got criticized by one of the design fellows because I cried during the interview with a 13-year-old girl who had been sexually assaulted multiple times by her father. I couldn't keep my 4th wall up. I couldn't do it. It was heartbreaking. And I own my own weaknesses in those moments, but I also own that I'm like a human before I'm a researcher. And I think one of the principles here is like, always think about being a human first and a researcher or a designer second. And you'll get what you need, or you'll go back and have more conversations. So translation, a big one for international work. Do not do simultaneous translation during interviews or research activities. Find someone who can facilitate in the local language. So an example is we did an adolescent sexual health project looking at how to delay first pregnancy of recently married child brides. This young girl in blue is 13 and she's pregnant with her first child. She was married a year before. The woman in orange is Jude, who was my local Hausa speaking and Arabic and French speaking partner, facilitator. She was technically my translator. She was hired to be my translator, but I knew that she wasn't going to be my translator. She was going to be the one actually doing all of the research and design work. So my job was to train up Jude, help her understand the kinds of conversations we want to have. And then I just sit back and take notes. and observe and document. And I get paid to really just support Jude in facilitating the experience for this young girl. Another example is this project. We have a project in the US looking at housing equity and transportation equity, specifically the tensions between immigrant Latinos who work on ski mountains here in Colorado, but can't live anywhere near the ski resorts that they work at because the ski towns are so expensive. And this community workshop that we did, this ideation workshop, everything was bilingual, every single thing. So it's double the work. If a sentence was said in English, we actually said the next sentence in Spanish. If a sentence was said in Spanish, the next sentence was translated in English. Took twice as long. All of the personas were in both languages. All of the materials were in both languages, but it allowed the playing field to be leveled. And some of the white Anglo English-speaking folks from the communities were like, God, this is kind of cumbersome, isn't it? And it was like, yeah, but what do you think being a Latino immigrant living in Aspen feels like, my friend? Pretty cumbersome. So it's also an empathy development technique for some of your participants. Jan or Jean or Jan, I will answer that in a moment. Okay, so let me just summarize a couple of things that I think are critical elements of designing for equity. First things first, acknowledging and naming power and privilege. And this is really uncomfortable for a lot of people. And you gotta practice it, especially if you are sitting in a position of power and privilege. It is your job to start getting comfortable with it. I read something that really helped me a couple of months ago or a few weeks ago, that oftentimes, especially like white, straight people, have a really hard time naming racism and privilege in the racial injustice conversations that are happening. Not because we're afraid of hurting anyone's feelings, but because we're afraid of getting it wrong. And we're afraid of being judged for getting it wrong. That is our shit, my friends. That is not, you can't project that out onto anyone else other than yourself. So acknowledging and naming power and privilege is really uncomfortable and really difficult, but we gotta do it, so you gotta practice. And if anyone wants to practice, I'm happy to be a resource to practice with. Really dig deep and understand the motivations behind the work. It is not always clean. It is not always above board. I don't know another way to say it besides it's not clean. You got to know where the project's coming from, why it's happening, who's involved, what's the money source, what are the intentions and the ultimate objectives, and then you got to make a decision for yourself. Like, do you want to get involved? Sometimes the answer is like, no, thank you. Don't want to be involved in that one. A critical element is eliminating barriers and inequities. Eliminating them, removing them. I want to say really importantly here that, and it's related to the next one, just making space for people who are typically excluded to sit at the table, quote unquote, not good enough. That is passive. That just perpetuates a racist or a misogynist or a classist or a whatever-ist system. You have to, if you want to be an equitable designer, a designer who can do equity work, who can do inclusion work, you need to actively create processes and systems and tools and methods that bring humans to the table, or bring the table, even better yet, to them. Or don't even own the table. Try not to own the table. That'd be even better. It's not just about saying, and I'm gonna use one example that might get me in trouble. It's not just about saying, I'm running a workshop and I'm gonna give 100% discount to a BIPOC person, and then you blast it out to your listserv. Well, if your listserv is mostly privileged white people, well, then that doesn't really work now, does it? And if I do that, am I offloading the responsibility of the BIPOC person to my network? So now my network has to go figure out where the BIPOC humans are and bring them in, and that's not good enough. Active, it has to be active. It can't just be passive. And I guess this is the point I was trying to make. Intentionally design process and methods to include excluded individuals and communities. Does it change if you are BIPOC? Does what change, Christina? I want to make sure I understand. I'll wait for you on that one. Context of it being okay. I don't know. I don't know that I can answer that. Maybe. I don't know. I don't feel equipped to answer that, to be quite honest. Is that okay? Can I say I don't know? I'm going to say I don't know. I'm going to feel good about saying I don't know. The last critical element for me in designing for equity is about seeding and repositioning power. This is that ego that I was talking about. I think more than anything, it's really hard to give up your own power. It is really hard to say, I am not going to speak at that conference in August because 38 out of the 40 speakers on the website are white. It's really hard not to like be aligned with that really fancy, impressive brand and to get all the attention and the recognition. It's really hard to say, but it's the work. That's the work we got to do. Can you give up your seat for someone else? Can Grid Impact give up a project for a Kenyan-based design firm? Yes, like confidently, yes, we can. Absolutely, Max. Yes, BIPOC, queer, people with disabilities. Can we include women there, please, as well? Thank you. Trans. Like, there are many people who need support around the world. Global South. I mean, a lot of our work's international. I talk a lot about Global South-led organizations, Global South teams, not Global North. These are just some of the things that we try and think about in our work. We're not going to break up into small group discussions because it just takes a lot of time to go back and forth. This might be like a little bit of personal reflection for you. I particularly care more about the second question because I'm really into like this being personal work. I mean, yes, it can show up in our professional way, but if we don't do the work as an individual first, it doesn't matter, and we're not going to affect change on a broader scale. So if you feel like you have any kind of power or privilege in any system anywhere in the world, how might you extend your power and privilege to the participants in your research or design process? You can think about your work context if you are a designer or a researcher, if you want to think about it on a more personal level. But if there are any tangible, specific, tactical things that you feel like you might be able to do to shift that power, to include actively participants that need active engagement because they are excluded from the system, I'd love to hear if anyone has ideas. Think of this as like a generative conversation. You can either type it, or if people want to speak, please feel free. We'll just take a minute for this. Or we have no ideas, I don't know. Great, Brad, easy, perfect. So easy to do once you decide to do it, right? Like it doesn't have to be difficult. So Brad wrote, when I and my team set up time slots for research participation, we include a lot of time slots outside of work hours. Absolutely. What else? What can you all do? And I love that, Max. Oh, Max, will you tell us more? You sound like a rabble rouser too.
Yes. And I get fired, you know, and I'm white, so I can get fired because I want to move the needle. But yeah, I'm always, I used to work in finance where I was actually doing what people were telling me to do. And that was part of the working group we talked together of like, I don't do that anymore. Like if a decision is made that will harm some people or some communities, I'm saying no, and I'm asking why we make that decision. And that means a lot because I work with a lot of tech and startup, which I'm working less because they don't want me to work with them because I'm asking the annoying questions. And most of the time it's like because we need to make money because the investors want us to make more profits. So at some point I realized this is not, so they either get rid of me when I ask too many questions, which is fine. I mean, fine. This is where I'm holding my power. I'm trying to believe that I will have better people in my journey. And yeah, that's one of the things I do. I want to leave more space for other people.
Max, we are aligned, my friend.
I know. I'm like,
I'm not, like I said in the very beginning, I'm not here to make friends. I'm here to like do some great work with some great passionate people who are creative and smart and make me better. If that means I lose some friends along the way, so be it. I'd rather be on the right side of all the history than get an extra paycheck. I don't know, that's ridiculous. Personally. I'm not suggesting everyone should do that. Sonia, from a social justice perspective and experience in the social service sphere, I think about how are we trying to work ourselves out of a job? Yes, Sonia. Same. I'm with you. Greg wrote, making value triplicates about how what you are doing benefits multiple parties. Christina, don't make assumptions ever. It's so hard. It sounds so simple when you write it like that, but that's so hard to do, right? It's a real practice. It's a real practice. Lauren wrote, I always open research sessions by stating that they are the expert, not me. I'm there to learn from them and they're, yes, me too, Lauren. So I go like super extreme. So especially when I'm overseas, I've worked in like the financial inclusion sector for like 20 years. I know a lot about like mobile money and women's economic empowerment. Whenever I get into like a mobile money interview, I'm always like, what is mobile? Like, what is it? Oh my God. We don't have it in the US. We don't technically have it in the US, but I play dumb. Like I go extreme. And sometimes whoever I'm with doing the research, they're like, why did we hire you if you don't know anything? And I'm like, no, I'm playing a role. Like it's acting a little bit. I mean, I don't want it to sound disingenuous. It's not disingenuous, but it's about shifting the power from like a white lady from the US to a rural Mozambican woman in northern Mozambique. How do I make her feel like she is the expert? Yeah. I do the same thing. I go a little extreme maybe. I'm like, I don't know, show me. I don't know how it works. Elisa wrote, actively do my research to find community co-designers who can help me design my research process for the vulnerable. Yes. Quiet, safe, quiet space for interviews that you have access to. We've had, Barry, on that, we've had a lot of success, at least here in Colorado, with libraries. Libraries have become, like public libraries have become it's like we've moved in. It's like we don't even need offices. We do so much in, a lot of the public libraries have private rooms that you can reserve. It's a wonderful, safe, quiet space. This is an idea. Invite participants to our meetings with our clients to hold both ourselves and the clients accountable to the community. Yes, Emily. And be more transparent about our process and how what they share with us will, yes, absolutely. So Antonio, you said extend gratitude and appreciation. When we're doing in person, we write thank you notes. It's super simple, but we write thank you notes and we include our personal contact information. I still talk to, as like a kind of big sis auntie, so many of the young women that were in my Sexual Health Colorado project from a year ago. We're just like text buddies. They tried to get me to join Snapchat, but I don't know how that works, so I can't. But it's all because we wrote thank you notes and included our like personal contact information. Kara, I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, says when you feel an assumption forming, pause, wait, or ask another question. Silence. We didn't talk about silence today, but like the power of silence, my goodness. Powerful, powerful. Max, that's I like it. They are only sharing job opportunities to where are the Black designers Slack. I love that, Max. Like funnel, tunnel, create pipeline, right? Kyle wrote, I air my biases early and often in the design process to establish a space where the rest of my partners can do the same and we can challenge each other. I agree, Christina. It's a huge loss that libraries have closed. I'm just still reading. There's so many things coming in. All right, keep posting because we're gonna again share all of this. Let's open it up. I'd love to source some questions, offer ideas, and have conversation.
I posted a question.
Oh, sorry. Is this the one? I make posts on LinkedIn encouraging others to post on different non-white dominant platforms. Where do other people find diversity and better inclusion? Great. So one of the things that I'm including it in my resource slide, which is coming up in a second. I have really, I'm still active on LinkedIn because it's sort of a status quo bias thing for me. Like it's just been a behavior that I built over time. But some of the Slack communities are giving me life these days. And Max, I'm also peeping on the Where Are the Black Designers, as well as the Design to Divest Slack channel, which is awesome. So I'll add those here too. But like the Design Justice Network, Designers Group for Good, I would be remiss if I didn't give a shout out to Sada Fatala and Molly Ruskin for founding that. Some of these Slack communities really are giving me life and making me feel very connected in a time of deep disconnection during 2020. But also they just seem to be, and I don't have data, Christina, to support this, I perceive them to be more inclusive and more diverse communities. That may not be true. Again, I don't have data, but my intuition and my feeling is that the Slack channels, at least that I'm in, are more representative than like a LinkedIn, for example. But do other people have other ideas? Are you sharing ideas for Christina? Jan asked me privately, just curious, from a business perspective, how many projects do I do, or does Grid Impact do a year, and how do we find our projects? So I'll just say that really quickly. 2020 is a bit of a different year. I'm gonna hope that maybe it's not foreshadowing the future. This year we've got about 7 projects currently, and we're about halfway through the year. I think on a normal year, we're somewhere between like 10 and 15 projects. Some are small, some are bigger. Most of our projects are, and this goes to like an equity and inclusion issue, most of our projects are network referral based. We try and get our name out there. We also do a lot of referring of others, but mostly because we do like behavioral design, which is a little bit of like a subset of the design for equity, inclusion, and impact world. We tend to get things that are really focused on human behavior, uptake, usage, engagement, adoption, things like that. But it's referral based mostly. Antonio, I think it was Antonio mentioned earlier, like RFPs. We basically do not respond to RFPs unless it has been directly shared with us by the organization and they have asked us to submit. But like open calls, no, thank you. It's like, what a pain in the ass, number one. And number two, like you never have any idea who you're going up against. They make it impossible for you to even do a good job on putting together a proposal because, anyway. So we only will do that if it comes directly from the source. So like we got an RFP last week, or a TOR last week, from a repeat client, and they gave us a little like winky on the email, like, we're putting this out. And I was like, okay, pick up the message. I get it. Yeah, we'll submit a proposal. But no, like open source stuff like that, no way. Antonio asked, with the need for flexibility in mind, what boundaries do you set as a researcher? That was a hard question. The obvious answer is it depends on the partner, it depends on the project, it depends on the scope itself. Sometimes I feel like our projects are scoped too narrowly, and so in our research, we want to open it up. So as an example, the project that I showed you those photos from, Pueblo and Adams County and here in Colorado, the Sexual Health Teenager Project, the original problem that was given to us was how to reduce unintended pregnancies of Latino adolescents in Colorado. We found it super problematic. There's a ton of reasons why that problem statement itself is super problematic. And we knew enough, because we'd done work in the space, that many reasons, that young people get pregnant, like there's lots of bigger issues at stake. It has to do with family and context and class and the education system and fucking racism and all the other things. And so we had to, through our research, convince the foundation who was supporting the work that the project was actually this, not this. So sometimes we're trying to open it up. Other times we feel like our client is like out here with their problem area and we're like, okay, we need to narrow this down. So it really depends. I know that's a shitty answer, sorry. But it's true. And Brad asked on top of that, how do you balance the need for flexibility with being rigorous? I'm not sure that they are in tension with one another. So we haven't done like a survey in so many years now. Like we are so mixed methods, qualitative, using also like quant transactional data or administrative data, that we have a lot of room within our methods as is. I think the rigor comes more in the synthesis and analysis phase of the research, not necessarily in the collection of the stories, if that makes sense. I think I believe what I just said. Sometimes I say things and I don't believe what I say, but I think I believe that. Sarah can call bullshit on me if she thinks it's bullshit. Christina, I agree with Slack is a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot. As a behavioral designer, what I do is I give myself like an hour in the morning just to like scroll through, check in, see if there's anything relevant. Cool, there's not, minimize. And like come back the next day. Okay, Amrita. We want to build an equitable anti-racist design practice, but we recognize we have to start from a place of self-reflection and assessment. We believe that empathy is a good starting point, but not enough to believe that we're immediately equipped to work with diverse communities. Okay, so my friend and collaborator, Jessie Weaver, just wrote a Medium piece that I'm gonna link to in the resources about basically how human-centered design is a white supremacist system. I'm paraphrasing. And why relying on empathy is super flawed. And Antoinette Carroll talks about this a lot as well. I think George even touched on it a little bit, if I'm not mistaken, in his talk last month. Coming from a place of empathy is very limiting, because if you are an outsider, you will never, like this whole like walk a mile in their shoes, put yourself in their shoes. It sounds nice and it like helps IDEO get clients, but like it's not real. That's not real. It's really inequitable and it's really exclusionary, actually. So I will share that article with you. He says it far better than I could say it now. But I would be careful about coming from like an an empathy standpoint. I think that there are lots of practices and there are lots of frameworks. So I printed one out because I didn't know how to show it to you otherwise. But Project Inkblot, and I'm linking to it on this slide, Project Inkblot put together this design for diversity framework, which is a wonderful framework. It's not dissimilar from the questions that I use in my work, but there are lots of different frameworks and ways to do this kind of work. Oh, AOTA, I think, is on here too. Did I put AOTA? AOTA's here. So they have a lot of tools and frameworks and methodologies as well. There are tons of stuff out there, and I will link to a bunch of things, Amrita, that you might be able to use. Okay, what else? Alba, recruiting tip. Yes, I love that. Oh, Alba, can I include that in our ideas?
Yeah, sure. Go ahead.
Cool. That's a great one. And what a great way to like plug into community also, just on a personal level, right? I'm just scrolling. What am I missing, guys? Antonio makes this point about like how we even understand empathy. Totally agree. And some of the pieces that I'll share, the Medium pieces, I think start to unpack that. Christina, tell us, when you write, I feel really crappy after all these, who designers are perceptive as a designer. Are you able to share more about that? Can we support?
Yeah. the breakout session that I was in, I won't say who else was in there. As a fellow designer, I just think I don't want to be overly emotional. I just think there's been some comments about design and some opinions tonight. That was all.
That feel negative?
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. Are you able to?
I know you didn't do it on purpose, so you know.
No, I mean,
it's
I
a
might
safe
have.
space.
I might have. So I'd love to talk about it a little bit. So are there specific negative comments that you can point to? I'd love to make sure my intention and impact are linked.
The comments about abilities of a designer to not have that research or certain understanding in schooling. And then you just made some comment a second ago, so I actually blacked out.
Okay.
That's all.
So I'm not familiar with any undergraduate design program that teaches impact evaluation. If you can point me to one, I would love to learn.
Yeah, I don't know either. Like, that's my wheelhouse is not learning what other design schools teach.
Yeah, so my belief, and I stand by it, is that designers are not taught rigorous impact evaluation. And I stand by that statement. And I'm sorry if you feel like it's critical, but it's what I believe, and it's been my experience. Yeah, and I'm sorry if it out in an aggressive or critical way, but I definitely mean it as a criticism, actually, and I'll own that criticism.
I think, can I say something actually about that? Because I noticed that I actually had commented on that when you said that in my group as well. But, and I wonder, part of me was thinking it's not, it depends on the kind of designer you are. Like, I'm a visual designer. So although I do have a UX training, so I was taught about research and evaluations and stuff. And then I think it's okay for a designer to not necessarily, it depends on where you are in the silos of design. If you are designing a poster, it's just ethically responsible to know that your design is going to impact people, but measurement is not necessarily our job. So I was actually able. So I'm partially sympathetic to what Christina was saying, only because I understand her response. But then I can also see, this is my gift from my mother, is to be able to see both sides of everything. Talk about empathy. And I think like that's what UX and research, and even like on my team in particular, digital strategists, that's what they're for. They're to measure those things. So depends on the kind of designer you are. And as a person who's trained primarily in visual design, I just, anyway,
I totally.
That's me seeing both sides. Okay.
Yeah,
can I add something in there?
I'm just gonna, AJ, I just have to respond just because it is responding to my comments. So Jennifer, I totally get your frame, and I appreciate that reframe. Thank you. What I will say is, even like a visual designer designing a poster, just because it's like been designed does not mean it will not have harm. And so being able to identify, right. So that's my point. Like, design school does not necessarily teach rigor, and I'm not talking about, I didn't say research. I specifically said like monitoring and evaluation. Design school doesn't teach how to measure that kind of impact of interventions, solutions, whatever you want to call the design thing. It could be a product, it could be a service. And I believe that all designers should actually have a much better understanding of how to identify and I'm not saying they have to do the measurement, but I think understanding impact evaluation and measurement and metrics and impact, because this word impact is thrown around constantly, I think it's really important. I personally think it's really important.
Okay.
Sorry, AJ. Oh, go ahead, Jennifer, if you want to.
Oh, no, I was just going to say thank you. I actually I've been walking this whole time, but I've been really enjoying listening to you talk, which is really rare.
Thank you. That's really generous of you. Thank you.
Sure.
Yeah, I wanted to chime in. I appreciate the comments on all sides of this. I think it is an important time to listen and reflect. and hear the points. And I did share that book, White Fragility, about defensiveness, and regardless, I guess, of where, maybe it doesn't have to do with race, but like thinking about defensiveness and where that might be coming from, and investigating that as a community at large, as an individual. So that's my sense in that. I see some comments coming in, but I really appreciate you, Alex, for joining us this evening. Yeah, wonderful chats. We can continue going on. I just wanted to be cognizant of time as well.
Yeah, I'm like the discomfort conversation. I'm totally here for it, so I'm happy to stay and be in it. I think this is the kind of opportunity where we're going to have shifts. I know AJ, you had come off mute and wanted to share something, so I just want to create space for AJ. But Natalie, I totally agree, and thank you for saying those things. And Christina, also, if you want to have a one-on-one after, I'm happy to do one-on-one. Sorry, AJ.
Oh, no, you're fine. Thank you for circling back to me. You gave a little bit more context to your response. So the stuff that I just wanted to add in terms of sourcing designers from other disciplines, such as market research, program management, because those people have, or just marketing in general, or a holistic marketer who can understand impact over time and how different pieces fit together. We all have our blind spots, and something is always going to impact something else. So keeping an eye on it and understanding how, as you said, continuing to monitor it and move pieces around as you can, and or influence and or bring, a spotlight to those things. So I just wanted to add in those. Even taking courses there, so that amplifies your experience that you already have, so you don't necessarily have to look at something at the graduate level as you proceed through your career.
Totally.
Potentially.
Thank you for saying that, AJ. Yeah, I totally agree. And just to honor, I think this comment might have gotten lost, but Christina also mentioned that they took a whole class on surveys. And surveys is one part of it, but I also want to, maybe my conversation around rigor was too binary. It can be rigorous qualitative impact evaluation. It doesn't have to be quantitative. So and if anyone wants, this is legit a topic I could spend days on. So if anyone does want to really dig into impact measurement of design, there are some really interesting papers that are relatively new to the space that I'm happy to share. And I'm totally happy to jump in and have smaller group conversations around that, because it's something I'm really passionate about. What else do we have, folks? I will share all the resources I can think of. And I'm in these Slack groups, and I'll add a couple of other Slack groups that I'm in. So also feel free to reach out to me on Slack. I have a bizarrely comprehensive digital library of a whole bunch of random things. So if there are specific resources that you're looking for, if you're working on something like environment plus behavior, whatever it is, feel free to ask. And if I don't have a resource, I'm happy to help you look for it. And when you ask for papers, some of them are going to be peer-reviewed academic journal papers. I'm just warning you in advance. Okay. Anything else? And I just want to also honor Christina. Thank you for, I'm big in thank you for speaking your truth and speaking where you felt discomfort. I appreciate that. And I actually think it opened up a helpful conversation. So thanks for being brave and vulnerable. I agree, Sonia, 100%. Okay, Max just did the thing. Max, you did the thing. Max, I'm gonna invite you. I'm gonna put it one more time if I can figure it out. We have a Google spreadsheet somewhere. Does anyone have that link still? I'll scroll up and get it.
Yeah, I can drop it back into the
I've lost it.
Looking at it.
Here it is. I found it.
Somebody else did it before. Good job.
If anyone wants to connect, I don't want to lose that in the chat also. Oh, thank you. Wow, everyone. Oh my God, amazing. Everyone just put the link there. You won't miss it now, Max. But Max, if you want to connect with some folks after, feel free to and sorry if you didn't have immediate access. Oh, a lot of you filled it out. You can fill out the spreadsheet and we can connect that way too. And whoever just requested access, I'm trying to figure it out, so give me a second. And I will hang out for a couple more minutes if anyone wants to have any other private conversations or smaller group conversations. And if you want to have like a one-on-one, please feel free to reach out to me. I will put my contact information in the spreadsheet as well. I realize mine's not in there yet. But if you want to reach out, I'm happy to do one-on-one as well.
All right, thanks, Alex, and thank you all for coming tonight and participating in this great conversation. Yeah, stay tuned for our future events, and we're gonna take a little summer break, but after that, we will be back. Thanks again for coming in and filling out the networking sheet. If you have any questions, you can reach out to us, reach out to Alex afterwards, and I don't know. Thanks, Alex. I know whenever we do the clapping, we need to talk at the same time or you won't hear the clap.
Quick note, whoever has a Capital One address, it won't let me give you access because of your Capital One setting. So maybe use a personal email. Yep. Thanks.
All right. Have a good night, guys. Feel free to drop if you need to and stay to talk to Alex if you like to. And thanks again. Have a good night, guys.
Oh, and Kathleen, I'm just
thanks, Alex.
I'm sorry, dear.
No problem.
Oh. And I think we'll stop the recording now so that if anyone wants to ask anything off recording, we can.